a managing director at Busan International Fantastic Film Festival in South Korea. I do industry programs there. I also program the English language titles. I'm also the curator of India's 𝐿𝐵𝐻 Mumbai's After Dark section. I am truly honored to moderate this fantastic Scream Queen session with fantastic genre minds providing women's perspective on this topic. Traditionally, female characters in horror films were either victims of violence or survivors due to the male protagonist's heroic works. Outside of a few exceptions, only in 21st century that we begin to notice a strong presence of women heroines or villains or villainous taking shape, whether it's a Revenge, You're Next with Final Girl angle, or evil villainous of Get Out and Emily. These strong female characters present changes taking in horror spectrum. So women are capturing the pulse of this visceral thrill. So tonight we will delve into how the genre evolves with a subtle gaze with our 7 fantastic women filmmaker panelists. So let me briefly introduce them to you. First, we have Roshini Bhatia. She is a Mumbai-based writer-director whose short films have been showcased in numerous film festivals worldwide. And her film, Dark Pass, won the 60 Scary Seconds competition at Raindance Film Festival. So it's great to have you, Roshini.
Thank you, Thomas.
Okay. Next, we have Melody Cooper. She's a writer-director who is named as one of the top 25 screenwriters by the International Screenwriters Association with her works on Law and Order SVU and on NBC Universal, and 2-sentence horror stories on Netflix, among others. She's also a co-founder of NYX Nix Horror Collective and is currently developing an original horror film with Fearwork. So welcome, Melody.
Thank you. Hi.
Okay. Next, we have Kelly Krause. She's a former archaeologist turned screenwriter director whose genre works have been awarded by leading script contests, including Page and Short Scripts, and many others. And as a co-founder of Nix Horror Collective and Disaster Capital, a genre production company, she is helping to make woman-led genre contents to become a norm rather than an exception. She is also currently developing a fictional sci-fi horror podcast. Fantastic. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Thomas.
And next we have Isha Luthra. She was only 22 years old when she wrote the story of the segment of Netflix Ghost Stories. She has worked on numerous films as an assistant director, 2 titles including Sacred Games and Checked, and both are available via Netflix. Welcome, Isha.
Hi, thank you, Thomas.
Okay. And next we have Terry Samundra. She's a director-screenwriter whose debut feature was a Netflix original called Kali Kuhi. And it was released internationally in October last year. Her short films have been shown at different film festivals internationally, gathering numerous awards. She is an active member of the Writer Guild of America and is represented by Gersh Agency. She's active in both India and USA. So welcome, Terry.
Thank you.
And lastly, we have Sapna Moti Nani. She's a producer director of Sindustan, a documentary which was shown at different film festivals all over the world and winning numerous awards as well. And she's currently in the post-production of her feature film, My Dog is Sick, a psychological horror thriller. And she founded Wench Films to empower female storytellers. She's also writing a book titled Chapter 1 for HarperCollins. And thanks to her, we are having this discussion tonight. Welcome, Sapna.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you so much.
So we have this fantastic panelists here. There are so many topics we can talk about, but generally speaking, horror films, what attracts female audiences or what attracts female filmmakers to horror genre? I mean, that's, I guess, biased people, including myself, sometimes wondered. I always considered horror meant screaming teenage girls holding onto the boyfriend's arms, and that was it. I know. I'm such a ignorant. But you can tell us maybe what drives the audiences and what drives you to work on the horror genre. Anyone can start.
I mean, I'll go ahead. For me, I feel like it's a really creative space to explore. I'm interested in just the way that my mind works and the way that I think about storytelling. It gives you like a really beautiful place to explore with characters and storytelling and using surreal spaces and dreamlike spaces. And, it's an interesting question that you have, or, when I think of genre, I think of horror, I think of dark fairy tales. I actually think so much from the female lens and from the female perspective. Like I think of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and, all the things that I love. And those are generally exploring kind of the darker elements of the human story. And so I think for me, it just feels like a natural space to play in as a storyteller. It's not, you don't have to be so linear. And I think that's what I'm attracted to more than anything. It just gives you a lot of place to many more tools to explore and play in cinema.
I always I think of horror as and the things that horror makes us think about and feel. Fear is a human issue. So the idea that it's male or female doesn't register for me, because it's a human genre. And I love exploring social issues, and I find that horror is a great way to kind of turn things over on in a different way to look at human nature and the things that we do to each other, we do the environment. And it's exciting to be able to play with that. And I think there's a lot of empowerment for women in the way in which we can address a lot of different issues through horror. So I have so much fun playing with it for that reason. And I've been lucky enough to work on shows that were created by women, and that had the show that I worked on had mostly women in the writer's room. And we were writing about stories from a woman's perspective, which seemed, it's kind of rare, but it's happening more and more. And it just allows you to look through a slightly different lens. But I can write not just about women, I write about men. I write about, non-binary people and LGBTQ. I don't have to be in those communities to write about them. I'm writing about it from a woman's perspective, so it will always have me and a woman's eye looking on it. But I think it's just, horror just opens up a whole horizon for us, and it's so much fun for that reason.
Exactly. Like, I agree with Melody in that sense that, so when we're talking about so many, like, there are issues, there are real life issues that are I think, more horrific than what ghosts can be. And I think it's, especially for women, we're really strong. And when I was asked the same question a while back, saying, oh, how could you make something so gruesome? How could you write that? And for me, it was like, who better? I mean, we can talk about these stories which are really not talked about. So my story was more about a miscarriage and her having to deal with all of the horror and the anxiety to do with it. I mean, who better than women to actually talk about these stories?
For me, I think it's that horror is just such a visceral genre, and I don't mean just fear. I mean that's kind of a gimme. That's what's expected, right? It's that fear aspect of it. But I don't think any other genre runs the gamut of human emotions. I really don't. You know, obviously, yes, I've seen horror movies that terrify me, but I've seen horror movies that make me cry, that just absolutely break me. I've seen horror movies that make me laugh out loud. You know, it's just such a broad, diverse genre, and there's so much you can do with it. And for me personally, kind of touching upon what some of the other women have already said, that there's no better genre to explore human relationships. And that's something that I always do in my storytelling. That's kind of the one thing that's always there, is this exploration of human relationships and exploration of group dynamics and community dynamics, and how people either come together or not, or work together or not. And it's just, again, it's just such a great genre for that, especially when your back is against the wall and you're just trying to survive. Like, who can you count on and who can you not?
Yeah, I totally second Kelly. Like, when it comes to human relations, that's literally what it's all about. And same with, like Melody said, to me it's less about the gender and more about what the story is, regardless of your gender. What you walk into the theater, you're watching this movie. You know, I have a ton of people ask me, how do you make horror? Like Isha said, how do you make horror? And it's like it could be an amalgamation of fear, the blood, you know, what you see on the surface and below the surface. But for the most part, it is like every person from every walk of life walks into the theater, maybe after a bad day, maybe after a great day. But when they walk in, they might find something they can relate to, or they might find something that they walk away and get inspired by. And that is why I feel like it's such a wide spectrum, where you're like, you see stuff like A Quiet Place, which is full of gore, and then you will see but has human relations. But then you also have Babadook, where you see lesser blood, but it's more psychological. So it's such a wide spectrum, where it's like there's so much to work with. But at the same time, I feel like there's always something in those movies. When you walk in, you feel like you can take away something and walk out.
I think for me, like growing up in India, my first, anyways, all our stories have horror in it, because that's the best way for a parent to raise you, is to tell you shit's gonna happen if you don't do this. Yeah. So, and for me, since there was a lack of sex ed, and I remember watching Carrie, and when I got my period, to me it was like, yes, I am going to burn down my school, and I've got these special powers. And that's exactly when it was like my girlfriend who lived on the first floor of my building. She was like, calm down. Nothing like that is going to happen. Just take this picture, shove it into your underwear, and control your bleeding, my friend. And that was like my first time when I realized, like, horror can make you feel so powerful. I felt so powerful knowing that I was going to bleed and I was going to destroy things. I mean, for me, that was like, yes. But then, you know, of course, like growing up, and when I moved to America for 14 years, I went there when I was 18. So it was like the best time to go there. And then watching all Kathy Bates films, you know, and then you thought that everyone in Maine and Vermont were just like horror, and those places just didn't exist. And I still don't think that those states exist, and it's just all made up, and the people from there are just crazy. But I feel like having those influences and coming back to India and bringing a lot of America into what you're raised in India is such a great combination to explore, because it's like the best of both worlds, you know. So this is why I think horror is just fabulous, because sometimes you don't even have to spell it out. It's the silence that just says it all.
You know, the Melody and Kelly mentioned about the how the addressing social issues through the horror stories is quite important. But the situation are changing, of course, because now there's also the Me Too movements. There's also people recognizing different workplaces, difficulties in workplaces being exposed, like Joss Whedon cases and things like that. Even though these situations are getting better, I think there's got to be some more challenges. What do you think these challenges are, and what can we do to sort of like overcome those, if it's not right away in the near future? I guess one thing that I want to ask you, Melody and Kelly, because you two run a Nix horror collectives. I think there are many different issues that you are facing, obviously, with these topics. Maybe there are some things that you guys are trying to sort of like drive and maybe trying to overcome these obstacles.
Yes, I mean, as some of us already touched upon, there's kind of this perception that women don't like horror, or women can't write horror, or whatever, and that's just not true. We've always been there. And, I think somebody pointed out earlier that, 50% of audiences, horror audiences, if not more, are women. And so why aren't we seeing that sort of representation behind the camera? Why aren't we seeing more women, directing horror movies and horror TV series, writing horror movies and TV series, producing, etc.? And so I think that's something that is really at the core mission of Nix, is trying to find those avenues of accessibility and trying to get more women in those roles, because we know that those women are there. Like, we're a part of that community. Melody and myself and Terry and Roshni as well are also a part of Nix. Melody and actually, Terry and Roshni, I don't know if you guys have anything to add, at least on the Nix aspect.
Well, I would actually say it's a larger issue that goes beyond just women in horror. It's women in the industry. And so we're making slow gains. I think last year we had more women directing and more women directing horror than ever before. But unfortunately, those films weren't always given the marketing that they needed, so that they would find an audience. So there's so many hurdles, and accessibility and getting an industry to realize that a woman can direct. I remember I was on a plane to LA, and that story hit where I'll just say the head of a major production company said women don't like to direct horror, and that by the end of that day, there was an article that went out that listed women, including me, who had directed. I'd only directed a short film, but all these women directors, and said, we're out here. And so this idea, this misconception that women don't direct or haven't even directed, we have the experience. It isn't just that we like to do it, we have done it. And this panel is proof of that. And I'm currently in the Sundance Episodic Lab, Idea Lab, developing a sci-fi horror pilot. And it's interesting because the history out of Sundance is that a lot of men who can win something for just a short film, which is wonderful, can then go on to direct tentpole films. Whereas there are women who've won several times and have been at Sundance a few times and beyond that, and have lots of experience, and they can't get work. So it's about the industry needing to change and women needing to get more of a foothold in general, and then we'll see it expand also to women in horror. But I think that women in horror we're like the warriors in the front lines, because we don't take prisoners. So I kind of think that we're going to move the needle. Pretty much.
I love that, Melody. That was awesome.
There's somehow this perception that it's a risk to give it to a woman, to give her the chance to direct it, to make the film, as opposed to any guy. You're like, women are asked to train more. So that's what I was talking to somebody a few days back, that any woman at the same position as a man has twice or thrice the amount of experience to get to the same position.
Right.
Fortunately for me, I had, like, so far, I have had a very even playing field where I haven't had that experience, but I know that for so many people, and it to be true for the industry in general.
Yeah, there's a lot of unconscious, there's conscious, obviously, bias, but there's a lot of unconscious bias. And so, and like what Melody said, it's not just about getting your film greenlit. It goes all the way through to film distribution. And even if you have film distribution, who are the critics that are going to review your film? Who are the people that are going to watch your film? What is like that unconscious bias? I mean, I've had people say to me, women don't make good directors. I've had women working in the industry say that. I think that, and the thing is, time and time again, like if you're just talking about numbers show that women deliver. At this point, like it's maddening to me that we're even having this conversation. And just like Isha said, like, you have to prove yourself so much. Like, I have so many friends who've done 1,000,001 shadowing programs. I'm like, just hire people. It's really not that complicated. Like, they actually have more experience on set than a lot of other people. It's maddening. And statistically, like, I was just looking yesterday, a couple of reports came out in the past couple of weeks, and the numbers are just so slim for women just being hired to direct episodic work. So it's not just about, okay, you get your first feature made, and then that's it. I mean, that's a hobby. Like, how do you have a sustainable career?
Yeah.
And that requires like a massive overhaul in every single department of how that machine works, like how the nuts and bolts, and how it's put together.
Terry, I think you hit something key there, which is the unconscious bias, because the conscious bias, we're not going to change those people's minds. They've made up their minds. They've decided to be misogynist or sexist or bigots or whatever. But it's those people who are doing it unconsciously that I think we really need to invest our time in, that are more worthy of investing our time in, because they are actually the ones who do want to help and who think they are helping. Who think that, well, I love women, I think men and women should be equal, blah, 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 blah. Well, yes, that's great. But here is how you're still thinking about hiring women, even though you don't realize it. Like, here is this unconscious bias that we need to bring out into the open and start addressing through a dialogue with you, so that you can actually, yes, be a part of the solution instead of a part of the problem. Because that unconscious bias, I think, does so much more harm than the conscious bias.
Yeah. I mean, sorry. Go ahead, Melody.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to add quickly that what Terry said about things needing to change. They need to change at the executive level. They need to change at whoever is running a network. And it's beginning to change. We're seeing more women, but your showrunners. Hanelle Culpepper, for instance, who's a showrunner. She has directed on Nosferatu. But she's also heading up one of the top sci-fi shows, and she's bringing in women to work as writers and as directors. So we have to move up the ladder, and that's part of the issue too, is that we don't get promoted the way we should. But when we move into the higher levels of the executive levels in the infrastructure, then we can begin to bring women forward, and we can have more women working in rooms. I mean, for me, having a woman creator on my show was the reason why we had a room full of women. I mean, I was sitting there every day in a writer's room looking at there were 5 of us, and it was just like a breath of fresh air to sit there and create horror with a room full of women. And so that's something that I'm committed to. and hire women to work with me. And I did it in my short film, and I'm going to do it in my feature. And I think we have to reach back and bring others forward and mentor, and also call to task those who are at the top, and men too, because there are men who are allies. Like Glenn Mazzara is a wonderful example of a man who stands up for women and insists that women have a voice in the room and get hired. And so I think we have to look to that allyship, and then also ourselves take the lead.
I think that in India, though, the problem is completely, I mean, we're way behind, way behind. We do have women who are running the ship when it comes to big networks like Netflix or Amazon. But unfortunately, indie filmmakers like myself, we're not really given a chance because they're only looking at big production houses. So if you don't belong to a big production house or you don't have a big name attached to your project, you know, you're not even part of that conversation. I've also been told because, oh, she's only directed 2 films, she's too new to be given money and a film. But then there are men who are just starting out and like scripts and money are just thrown at them, you know what I mean? So this is really, really frustrating. But I do believe that things will change. The whole point of having, you know, this film festival, Wench, is just that, because I just saw like 4 men on a manel sitting there and talking about, and all these 4 men are known for making films on women empowerment. Okay, now they're sitting on this manel, they don't invite another woman, they're talking about cinema. And I was like, why is there no women on your manel? And they're like, where are the directors? Where are the women directors? So this is what motivated me to even start this. No one is saying women are better than men. This conversation is so tired. And this is not even the conversation we want to have. This is just that there is a lack of representation. And so the whole goal of this is, hey man, we're right here. You asked, where are we? Well, we're right here. So if you're looking to hire us, you know what? We're right here, right? P&G, just like an advertising agency, a brand, just put this out that in the next 3 years, 50% of their ads are going to be directed by women. That's a really big move by a brand, right? So what do? I talk to the brand. I'm like, hey, why don't you come on board? Like, you know, Wench Film Festival. And they're like, oh, what is our brand going to get if we come up there? I'm like, well, you're going to be walking the talk, right? You're going to stand by women directors. Well, here is your chance to do that. So there are a lot of big money people, brands, when they look at women and the way they look at women and what they want to say and what they do are completely different. And in India, we are so behind. I mean, America, you have got your writer's room. You guys are actually working towards progression. We're trying to do that. But the thing is, even the unity between the women here, it's really like, it's very difficult, very difficult. But we're going to change that.
I don't know if this would give you some hope, Sapna. I hope it would. But it wasn't that long ago when we were struggling just to kind of, you know, come together as a community as well. So 𝐿𝐞𝐥𝐥𝐲 did its own panel the other day with Tara L. Craig, who's a genre producer here in the USA. Her film Shook just dropped on Shudder. If you guys have access to watch Shook, it's great. It's a lot of fun. But she's been in the industry for some time. And we asked her, like, what's one of the biggest changes that she's seen, you know, from the point where she started out to where she is now. And that was the big thing that she hit upon, was what you hit upon, is this, you know, women actually coming together. And she said that that's really only in the past couple of years where she started to see that here in the States. And for the longest time, you know, women, and honestly, I think this applies across the board, regardless of what industry you're working in here, you know, but that women were just taught to compete with each other because there may only be one role available to you as a woman, and you know, don't let that other woman take it from you. And that was like the attitude. And so that's something that she's just really loved to see in the past couple of years, is this idea of community and women actually uniting and saying, like, let's not compete, let's work together, let's help each other out, let's put ourselves together out there as a unit, as a team, and you know, pull each other up the ladder.
You know, it's interesting, Sapna, what you were saying, and then also Kelly. I feel like I don't know if it's an anomaly, but I was so lucky with my feature. My executive at Netflix was a woman, and she really, took this project as like one of her babies and really shepherded. And then my producer was a woman, 𝐊𝐞𝐥𝐿, who's, was going to be on the panel. She was my editor. So I feel like we built our table. We didn't ask for permission. We were like, okay, we're going to take this thing and we're going to build it. And it was, this kind of surreal, dark fairy tale horror, very feminist film. And, it's my first feature as a director. So I think for me, it was very exciting. And we were very clear about that. And I just have had the opportunity to work with women, and I'm just so committed. I'm so committed to just, I think as we all move forward, just being so mindful of each of those pieces. And even like Sapna, you were saying, like with Amazon, I know some of the women who are working there are changes being made, but it's like, I want to see it even more. Like I want to see it deep. Like I want to see the tentacles go deep, so my hope, just because, I care so deeply about South Asian, and not just like films and series in India that go outside, but for Indians, and for South Asians, Pakistan, whoever, like in South Asia, like making great work for I'm also one of the audience, like I want to see that stuff. I want to hear those voices. I want to see those filmmakers and writers thriving, and I want to see those stories. So I hope that, for me, I guess I've had I had a great experience, and then I'm just like mindful of seeing what's happening. And, like Isha, the work that you've been doing is really exciting to watch. And I want so much, like, I wish I was in a position to just like give everybody like, a green light to everything they want to do.
Right. But that's the attitude, that's the difference, that like, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to be the only one there, instead of that, like mentoring and being like, okay, rooting for each other, rooting for women, instead of just always thinking, okay, it's going to be either me or her. And let's all do it together. There's enough space. There's just let's make more space instead of going, okay, no, just me.
But
I always think of it as
sorry. Always cutting you off.
I was just gonna,
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I always think of it as like, instead of fighting over the crumbs of this pie, of one slice of the pie, we have to bake our own pie and just totally change the whole conversation.
Yeah, I agree. But I think also in a country, America is different, but in India, there is no reason why, even when it comes to film festivals, why can't we have like hundreds of smaller genre-based film festivals? We don't have any.
Yeah.
We just have like some big ones because India is so obsessed by stars. That's the truth of it. And that's what you see on our OTT platforms as well. It's all about stars and the big names you bring on it. If you don't have stars, you get no money. So indie, which I thrive on and I love. So it's almost like either then you have to go and get someone, to come and be in your film and then try to change everything that you wanted to do, because they are not going to really understand what psychological horror is. And, oh, there is no dialogue in my 64-minute film. And they're like, what? Are you crazy? No. So, these are things that you also have to battle with when it comes to art. Versus, are you willing to put your art to the side just because you want to be on a big platform? For me, no. I'm not willing to do that. And thankfully for me, there is Movie Saints. So thank you, Movie Saints, which supports independent filmmakers like me. And we can, be with our art and create our art. And I fund my own films at the moment. I was a hairdresser, very successful hairdresser, and it gave me enough money to make my own films. But then I quit hairdressing last year. And like Kelly, you were saying about women getting in at an older age, I turned 50 in January. And I decided, you know what, fuck it. I'm only going to be a filmmaker this year. So now I don't have any other income. even as a filmmaker now, I can't hire a hairdresser whatsoever. But because I come from a hairdressing background, the hair in my films, oh, my horror film has gorgeous hair. I love emotional hair, you know? So all I'm saying is that there is a certain line you walk, and sometimes you want it so bad, and you have to decide that, do you really want it so bad that you put your artistic values to the side and you become this? And that's fair too. But for me, it's like, I just don't think I relate to that. And that's why I don't think I'm ever going to have some big producers going to say, hey, you want to do a film about horror legs? Here, take $5 gazillion and, just do it, because I'm just not. So I'm going to have to try to find ways to kind of fund myself, maybe have fabulous film markets like Bushon give me some money to do some horror films.
I think that's going to be a transition, because a lot of people don't understand psychological horror. For India, horror has been so much about just, ghost, or like just jump scares and all of that. So I realized this with ghost stories, that a lot of people, although they were a lot intrigued, a lot of them didn't understand it. They were like, even though it was on the main platform, they could just watch it and they're like, I don't really understand it. So for me, I was like, we're at that place that we want to watch more, content that can be watched internationally. But then I realized there's a long way to go, and I think it's going to take time. But maybe there'll be a time where you do get a lot of money to make that.
Yeah, 10 years from now, yeah.
I think, like, Sapna, what you're saying, I think it's always important for all of us as artists to take a step back and go, okay, why am I doing this? Like, what is the core essence of what I want to do? And then you figure out a way, like, so that you're not married, because it's like, what is it you're chasing? And if you're chasing a big producer, it has to be a reciprocal relationship. Like, they have to deeply care about the work that you're doing and shepherd it and foster it. For me, I'm like working in that space too, that artistic space where you're artistically liberated. How do you stay there? But then also it's like, how do you also make this not a hobby, and how do you make it a career and work? And so I think I'm constantly juggling that, and that's kind of, where I'm at, and figuring those pieces out.
Yeah. I think we have to learn to pick our battles. Probably sadly more so than men at this stage, but we have to be willing to compromise. But if we compromise X, does that mean that we can do Y? So, okay, I got to sacrifice this for now, but later on, I'm going to do this. I'm pushing this through. I'm not compromising on this.
Also, I just noticed it's been
hopefully a way to approach
20
it.
minutes, Tom. we're still answering your question, and you're just patiently listening to us.
Well, these answers are automatically changing into the next topic, which is fantastic. Because what I was going to ask was the difficulties of producing and maybe financing and distributing because of this pandemic thing. Also the advancement of OTT, or the viewing trend of our Generation Z, the 20-something teens and 20s, who no longer can sit through 90 or 2-hour films. Their definition of a long form is 60 minutes. So, so I was wondering, as a the genre fantastic creator, how do you go about sort of like adjusting to or accommodate these new money power of 20s and things like that? What are some of the things that you guys planning or trying to do?
I haven't been adjusting. Actually, at this stage in the pandemic, I only watch Criterion and movie films. Like, I've stopped with the new stuff. So I'm not, I'm back to, I love old classic cinema from the 70s. So I try really hard not to think about market. Like, that's not my job. And once I start to go down that road, like, even if I have a thought about it, I feel like whatever I'm writing, there's a fear that seeps in. So I just try really hard to only focus on story and elevating the work as best as possible. And then, you know, because I don't know, you see, I mean, like, for example, you know, like, say a film like Nomadland, not a genre film, but I mean, really, it's this verite documentary, slow-moving film. Who could have predicted in the market that that's a film that would have done really well? So I try my best as an artist to not think about that. I don't know if that's smart or not, but that's just, you know, my perspective.
I kind of feel the same way. I feel like hopefully the industry catches up with whatever your passion is. And like, I like to write about, and family is something that does well. I mean, you think about The Walking Dead is about family. I mean, just about everything, I think essentially in some way is about family. And you look at Minari, when you talk about a stunning film it's a very beautiful, simple film about family. And in writing about family, I find that it includes youth. It includes a whole range. I love to include older women because that's something you don't see very much on screen. When we talk about women in horror, especially, it's always skewing young. Well, it's like, well, how about women over 50? Since women over 50 are making films, let's like put us in there. And I happen that the feature, I did not write it during this time, Tom, as you mentioned, that things were starting to skew young, and that's not the reason why I wrote it. But the horror feature that I'm going to be directing is set in a high school, and it deals with teenagers, and so that's, I think, why there's been interest in it. But I didn't write it because I thought, let me grab the high school, you know, audience. It's something that I wanted to say, and I wanted to write about bullying and saving ourselves, and it ended up, you know, being what it is. But I totally agree with Terry. You have to just write what you're going to write. And you know, the world comes to things that are written from a place of where you have a perspective and where it's authentic and it's passionate. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's a great way to bring in your own unique experience, especially as somebody who is transitioning into this industry, right, from another career. So in Sapna, your case, it's hairdressing. In my case, it's archaeology. You know, but those are unique experiences that, you know, we can bring in and that are going to influence our storytelling, whether that's on the page or in front of the camera, like, you know, however we, you know, design the art direction or the special effects or the hair or the makeup or what have you, you know, like those are very unique experiences that other writers aren't necessarily going to have and that we can pull from to make our voice stand out.
Yeah. Agree.
I think I'm incredibly guilty of being the Gen Z and wanting to watch something. Oh, that's shorter. Oh, I don't want to watch long content. But it's something also that we're part of the culture that likes to binge watch. If it's something that's engaging, I will watch if it's long. I will not look at the time, I'm going to stop watching because it's been 2 hours. You know, so I do like a lot of, when I write, it's the opposite challenge for me to make it longer, and I find short films even more engaging. That, okay, how can you tell so much in such a small amount of time? So yeah, I think I'm the latter.
What do you think about the different platforms coming up? For example, there are certain movements saying the XR, you know, virtual reality, can be a part of filmmaking. There are people who say TikTok can be a part of filmmaking. What do you guys think about those?
I just had a conversation today and this evening about virtual reality because I feel that really fascinates me. My next 3 shorts that I've written are a series of all virtual reality. And because Whistling Woods is our partner for this festival, they are a film school in Bombay, and they have a fabulous VR facility. So they don't even know this yet, but I'm going to use them really well. And this is definitely something I feel is the future. And I think in India, we don't dabble in it as much. Even in our festivals, we're way behind. I mean, the world is dabbling in it a lot more. And this is something that I really want to bring to the table. So I think like 2-3 minute films in VR is what I've got 3 stories down already. And this is my next project that I want to go. It's once again psychological horror, and yeah.
I think
So
we should
I love
new things,
VR.
actually. Sorry. No, gosh, no. Okay, I
I
was saying that we should
Sorry, go ahead.
welcome. Okay, we should welcome new things. I mean, for India, like say being like online and having to do everything, like having an OTT platform, people were so afraid of the fact. I think the more we embrace it, the quicker we embrace it, I think the better it is, because that's the future. I mean, let's stop sticking to I don't think cinema culture is going to die if we switch to that. But I think I think virtual reality is the next thing, and we should be more open to newer things.
I was gonna say, yeah, I totally like in agreement with Sapna and Isha. It's just VR, AR, XR just seem like the way we are going, and it kind of like just ties in, Thomas, into your last question about the Gen Z. And it's like, as you move forward, yes, people are losing their patience, but also, like Isha said, we all are binging, we all are enjoying the content as long as it's good content, right? And so I feel like when we are doing something like VR, keep it short, keep it pithy. I have had the opportunity to meet so many wonderful VR filmmakers, just as you amazing women must have met these VR people who are trying to tell their stories, where they come from, something indigenous or something that's horror. Or there's so much opportunity in this area that it's like a huge playground, and you can do whatever the hell you want to do. Like VR has this app that is like Tilt Brush, which is basically you just keep painting, and it's like, wow, okay, so you have this, just get in some great graphic design artist or a person who knows how to work with paint and just try to create something out of it, and there you go, you have a still short story that you can just move throughout, and that's it. That's your story. There you go. It's out in festivals. People get your story. It's a still, it's short, it's pithy, it's effective, and it's telling a story. And that's what, at least from a short film point of view, I try to keep my films short, because people like short films. I have a 1-minute short that went out, and I feel like I have got so many reviews and good, and not trying to put myself forward, but so many amazing comments, as opposed to my 15-minute short. And it's like my 15-minute short didn't do equally well at all. And it's like you're watching, you're just observing what the market likes. But again, at the end of the day, it comes down to what you enjoy making, and it's telling the story you want, your experience, and kind of tying it into this skin of horror. So it could be your childhood experience, or your mother experience, or your best friend experience. And you're just using those experiences, integrating them, and wrapping it in a skin of horror, and just throw it out there in the universe and see what happens.
Yeah, I think there's a real, oh, sorry, Melody. I was just going to say, I think there's a real mastery in short storytelling. That's why I love like really good TikTok videos. It's just like what you get in that short amount of time. There's a craft to that. I mean, I think that there's all these new platforms, and the exciting thing about VR and just cinema in general, it's one of the newest art forms. So we don't need, like, I don't want to think about things in this very fossilized way, like 90 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, it's like there's so much space to explore. We just have to be open-minded and innovative. But experimental short films have been happening for a long time. It's just I don't think that people were watching them in the traditional cinematic way that we watch features. But if you look back, there's been experimental filmmakers from the beginning that when you go to film school, you watch their work, and they're not as readily accessible. But I think VR, I think TikTok, everything, I find it very exciting. And, I think that, again, like not thinking of cinema in like a fossilized way in which we create it, I think is expands for me as a viewer what I'm going to get to see, which I think is exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I've been advocating for VR for several years, and I was hitting this wall. And then in the HBO fellowship, that's the pilot I wrote. It's a VR pilot, and they were just really generous about being supportive of that, which is great. But I think that, and I'm not Gen Z, and I love binging, and I love the idea of including TikTok, and actually doing a hybrid, that it doesn't have to be one thing or the other. The idea that we can be experimental and that you can have something that has VR in it. And I think part of the issue with VR is also accessibility, because your audience has to be able, I mean, not everybody has Oculus, and I don't even have Oculus, though I want it. And I think and I know that you can watch a 3D film with cardboard glasses on YouTube. I mean, there's different ways for it to make the technology really accessible to an audience. So I think we have to also think about that, so that we can, I think it's important to make it, to give equal access to this new way of filmmaking, and shorts are a great way of doing that as well, because I think it makes it much more accessible.
I think we also have to think about accessibility for ourselves as the creators. And again, especially as women, I think we've all kind of discussed a lot of the challenges tonight about just trying to get our stuff out there. And Tom mentioned TikTok. TikTok is a fantastic way to get yourself out there. Make a micro short. Micro shorts, are these like 1 to 3 minute long films, and honestly, they get more views than any other film format, because they are accessible to everybody. Everybody can view them, and we can make them. We can make them using TikTok. And so I to Terry's point earlier, we shouldn't be afraid of these kinds of things. Like, we should be adaptable, and we should be flexible, and we should be open to them, because they carry with them opportunities for us. They carry greater accessibility for us as creators in general, but especially as women creators, and especially as women creators in the genre space.
Mm-hmm.
Well, TikTok's banned in India.
Is it?
Yeah, so I go TikTok for us.
Oh man,
well, I think sorry.
Well, you do have a substitute though, right? You just
there's a new.
Yeah, I think there's something else, Triller or something.
Yeah, there's something else. Yeah, that the young kids that I worked with on my last film, they're always sending me their videos. And I'm like, how did you get 5 million views? And they make like new videos every single day. It's so fascinating to me.
It's so hard to hold back creativity. It's just like a perfect example. TikTok is banned, and they found a way.
They found a way.
Yeah. But I think, and not that this is fair, but it's something that kind of pushes our creativity, right? We kind of have to think about, well, what else can we do? What else is accessible? So that, like, when Tom introduced me, he mentioned the sci-fi horror podcast. That's actually something that Nix has been developing. So Melody is a part of that project too. She's been a writer on that. And the major reason why we as a collective decided to do that was because COVID happened and everything shut down. And we thought, well, we should create something. Well, what's something that we can feasibly produce safely and independently on our own? And that was a podcast. So we started developing it. We don't have to necessarily rely on anybody else to do that for us and get us out there. Now, we're very fortunate, because the podcast hasn't even been released, but it's gotten out within Hollywood, and interest has been generated, which is exciting. But the mindset that we went into with it was that we will do this ourselves, and we can put this podcast out there ourselves.
Yeah, that's the baking the pie instead of waiting for someone to give you a slice of it. I think and Terry, you mentioned that too. It's like, not asking for permission. That's which, Ava always talks about.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you guys are all looking forward to these new technologies. Unfortunately, in Korea, certain people are set at certain aspect ratio, so they can never imagine TikTok as being a cinema that it's automatically discounted. So, but who knows? All we need is a Bong Joon-ho to make a TikTok film, then everything will be just hunky dory. So it'll be good. Well, this, even with, in my opinion, even with this advance in technology and so on, I think traditional distribution means kind of still exists. So, in order to overcome that, what do you think? Certain things need to be done. You guys mentioned about difficulties of woman-directed films finding sales agent and distribution companies. But at the same time, more and more genre-specific distribution companies are being created. Like a good friend of mine from New York City, they are called Yellow Veil Pictures. What I know is that they only handle genre titles, so what do you think is necessary for these films by women filmmakers to reach more audiences?
I think here in India, Tom, anyone who's seen my film, My Dog is Sick, in India, it's like, oh, I don't think anyone in India would ever even understand this film or even play it. So finding a market for that in India, as far as I'm concerned, is probably not even an option. I mean, I just got into a really nice, good film market. So I'm really excited that with my film to get into a film market, an international film market, is probably the best way to kind of get a sales agent for someone sitting in India. It's really difficult. If you are a genre film, indie filmmaker sitting in India, chances are that if an international festival does not help you out, you're probably not going anywhere. You could just release it on your own, but you're not gonna, get your money back on it or have any chance of going further with it. So I'm glad in that way I do have a film market now that has picked my film. So hopefully I will be able to get some agents on board and move forward with it, because India is definitely not the market here for something like that. Unless you have a big star, then automatically it's all okay. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, then how about this then? You guys mentioned about not sharing the pie, but baking the pie together. Are there any movements among women filmmakers or producers, so on, to sort of like help or support female filmmakers to sort of like sell and distribute those films?
Well, I can speak to Ava DuVernay has a distribution arm, and she has distribution is I mean, she recognized that distribution is now the other half of the battle that we're waging. You can make your film, finally get the opportunity to write it and direct it and produce it, but if you can't distribute it and no one sees it, then it just kind of falls off a cliff. So I know that she is trying to set the model for showing how women can distribute films, and there are other companies that are women driven and women led that are doing that, and there are more and more of them. But I think that's the best way that can happen is women taking, not waiting. As my grandmother used to say, don't have your hand out to Charlie. It's like we have to kind of wrestle with creating that as best we can ourselves. And it's not easy to do because it requires a lot of networking and a lot of money. I mean, that's what makes it difficult. And but we can start to build off of what's already out there, I think. Yeah,
I think she's a really good example because she was able to make that $100 million film because she started off marketing her own films and distributing it.
Right.
And that was her plus point. And I think she's extremely inspiring, and I'm hoping that some of us can do it here.
I think
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think with Ava, what's interesting is, Ava started as a publicist. And I think because Ava really understands what it takes to get a film out there and to not let it fall between the cracks. Because I think that is really key. Like what Sapna is saying, Isha, Melody, like you can make something, but if it falls between the cracks and you don't have a platform to show your work, then, how do you get your next film made? And also, you want people to be able to see your artwork. And also, there are audiences that want to see your work. So we need those people. And I mean, I think that because Ava came from that publicist world, she really understood how critical that is on the other side when your film is made. And I think, Sapna, that's what you're talking about being an indie filmmaker in India, making work that is not commercial. So how do you get your work distributed and out there and to the audience that does want it?
Right. Also, the good part is with Wench Film Festival, we have tied up with South Asian Film Market. It's a really big film market that gets you financing for your films. So they've given me a chance to curate 20 scripts written by women, which I'm really excited about. And they will get to pitch their scripts at this film market. And most probably, if you get financed, then they also have a production company. And this is exactly what I want to do with Wench. We just don't, the goal is you start off with film festivals and show films, but in the next 5 years, I want to have a platform of our own. I think there's no stopping us and we should aim for it. Why not? But in the meanwhile, just having South Asian film market where I actually can get 20 women to pitch their scripts. And if they're financed, they will even produce it and distribute it. And that's where the game is. And so with Wench Film Festival, this is exactly what we're trying to do. So if you have scripts, ladies, send them over.
That's amazing.
I mean, this is something that Nix is trying to do, and I apologize because I'm going to be very vague because we can't say too much just yet. But we are in the process of developing our own platform for women-led horror films, and that would include a distribution component. Though again, we can't go into that really right now. But we're very excited about it, and but I think it goes back to the point that we just have been repeating over the last few minutes. It's creating the pie together, and I think kind of recognizing that we all have our strengths. I think Terry and Melody made a great point about Ava DuVernay, like her strength. She works as a publicist, so she knew XYZ about like distribution and marketing. So who can we find? Like who's in our circle? Like who's passionate about women-led film and women-led horror? Like who has that experience? Like who's an excellent networker? Who's an excellent writer? Who's an excellent negotiator? Like how can we all come together so that we just bake the pie, the distribution pie ourselves, like where we're not waiting around.
Well, I guess that was also what I was gonna mention because I run a industry program, a genre project market, as well as a professional training program at BFund. So if you're an Asian filmmaker, especially genre, it has to be genre filmmaker, of course, and even if you're not Asian, if you want to work with the Asian components or Asian partners, then we welcome those projects as well. And
we're partners.
So, anyone who's watching this or any filmmakers, we are open for that. We have extensive records of female women filmmakers completing their projects as well. So hopefully that through BFund, some of your projects can also be made. Who knows? I think the time's up. I think we had a great discussion today. I want to thank to all the distinguished panel for participating in this Scream Queens panel discussion today. Also thanks to Wench Film Festival for organizing this session. I learned a lot from you guys, and I will make sure to put that into perspective for my future endeavors and so on. Thank you so much for everybody. And well, I think we did it. So this is it.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much,
Wonderful.
Tom.
This
Thank
is
you,
great.
Kelly. Thank you so much.